The first time she asked, it didn't sound like a flirtation. It sounded like a dare aimed at the cold itself. The wind had teeth in the northern pass, sharp, patient, and practiced at chewing through cloaks, armor seams, pride. It whistled between the black pines and over the dead rocks like it was counting bones. By the time Ryan reached the narrow stretch where the trail hugged the cliff, his eyelashes had iced together twice, and his breath came out in little ghosts that vanished too quickly. He told himself the storm would die by nightfall. He told himself lots of things out here. Ahead, the path narrowed to a ledge of slate, barely wide enough for a horse. But there was no horse tonight. Only his boots, the weight of his pack, the ache in his shoulders, and the quiet wish that the next bend would reveal a hunter's cabin or even an overhang deep enough to crawl into. Instead, it revealed her. She stood on the ledge like she'd been carved from the mountain's temper. Broad shoulders under a fur cape crusted with snow. Green-gray skin mottled darker at the joints. Tusks that caught the pale light when she turned her head. An orc woman, not a raider's banner, not a war party, just one figure alone planted squarely in the trail as if she'd been waiting for the world to catch up. Ryan stopped so fast his pack strap snapped tight against his chest. His hand went to his knife before he realized it. Muscle memory. The kind that got you killed if you didn't temper it with thought. The orc's gaze dropped to his hand and then rose again, steady as an anvil. Her eyes were amber, rimmed with lashes frosted white. "Put that away," she said, voice low and rough with the cold. He blinked at her. "This is a bad place to stop strangers." She didn't move. "And yet you stopped." That was true. The ledge offered no room to pass her without being close enough to smell her breath, close enough for a quick shove, close enough for a knife. Ryan forced his fingers to loosen on the hilt. Slowly, he let his hand fall away. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said. "Trouble found you anyway," she replied. He studied her stance, feet braced, weight evenly set, hands out where he could see them. No spear, no axe, but an orc didn't need metal to be dangerous. Their strength was legend and their endurance. Well, a man could freeze to death within sight of an orc who still had breath to spare. "What do you want?" he asked. Her gaze flicked past him down the trail he'd climbed, then up to the thickening sky. "A place to live through the night," she said. "Same as you." That answer landed oddly gentle in the wind, not a demand, not a threat, almost practical. Ryan's suspicion didn't ease. "There's no shelter here," her jaw tight. "Not here." She turned her head toward a split in the rock wall a few paces ahead, half hidden by hanging ice. Ryan hadn't noticed it, wouldn't have if she hadn't looked. A narrow cleft. A seam in the mountain. "You've been here before," he said. "Once," she admitted. "When I ran." The word was simple. The weight behind it was not. Ryan considered his options: turn around and descend into a storm that was only getting worse, or follow the orc into a dark crevice and hope the mountain killed him slower than she could. The wind made the decision for him, punching through his cloak with a burst that stole his breath. "All right," he said, keeping his tone hard. "But if you try anything," she cut him off with a humorless snort. "If I try anything, you'll be dead before your threat finishes leaving your mouth, so stop pretending and walk." He hated that she was right. She stepped aside, just enough for him to pass. Ryan moved carefully, shoulders tight, senses stretched. He slipped past her on the narrow ledge, leaving barely a finger's width between them and the drop. As he passed, he caught a scent beneath the cold smoke, not fresh. Old, settled deep into fur and skin. Someone who'd been near a fire recently. He wasn't sure whether that made him feel safer or worse. They reached the rock cleft. The orc pressed her palm against the stone and leaned in, shifting a curtain of ice-laced vines aside. The gap widened into a hidden passage. "After you," she said. "I'm not going first," she shrugged. "Then we freeze out here. I don't care which corpse the crows pick first." Ryan stared at her, trying to find the lie in her expression. There was none, only exhaustion, only the kind of blunt honesty that didn't bother dressing itself up. He stepped into the cleft. The passage swallowed him. The wind faded behind, replaced by a muffled hush. The stone narrowed, then widened into a hollow like the inside of a giant's fist. It wasn't a cave so much as a wound in the mountain, raw, dark, and old. The orc ducked in behind him. When she pulled the vines back into place, the last slice of gray daylight vanished. Ryan's heart thudded loudly in the dark. "Hold," she said. "Don't move." He froze. He heard her rummage, then the scratch of flint, a spark hissed, then another. A small flame bloomed, trembling, and revealed her face close by, hard lines softened by the flickering light. She cupped the flame with a practiced hand, feeding it a sliver of fat-soaked cloth. The tiny lantern she'd made came alive. Ryan frowned. "You have a light and smoke on your cloak. You said you needed a place to live through the night." The orc lifted the lantern and began to walk deeper. "I do." Ryan followed, still tense. The hollow opened into a wider chamber. Stalagmites rose like broken teeth. In the back was an overhang where someone had cleared the ground. A flat stone had been dragged into place like a table. Old ash lay in a ring of rocks, shelter, not warm, but sheltered. The orc set the lantern down and sagged to a crouch. She pressed a fist into her ribs as if bracing herself. Only then did Ryan see it. Dark stains near her side, half hidden by fur. The steady drip he'd assumed was meltwater, blood. His breath caught. She noticed his stare and pulled the fur tighter. "Don't," she said. "Don't what? Don't look at me like I'm a stray dog." "I wasn't. You were." Her eyes sharpened. "And you were going to ask, so I'll answer. Yes, I'm hurt. No, I won't die in the next hour. And no, you can't help." Ryan swallowed. "If you bleed out, I'm stuck here with a corpse and no fire." The orc's lips twitched at that, not a smile, but the ghost of one. "A practical man. I try." He eased his pack down slowly, keeping his movements calm. He didn't want to spook her, which was a ridiculous thought. An orc woman wasn't a deer, but pain made anyone unpredictable. He sat near the entrance, not too close. The lantern cast a small circle of light, leaving the corners of the cave thick with shadow. "Name?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "Braca." "Ryan." Braca grunted, like she'd filed the sound away without caring whether it fit. Silence grew between them, the kind of silence that felt like a third creature settling in to see what would happen. Ryan rubbed his hands together, trying to coax feeling back into his fingers. His gloves were damp. His bones felt damp. The cold was not content to be outside. It wanted to move in. He could build a fire. He had tinder and flint. But fire meant smoke, and smoke meant being seen, and being seen meant the very people he'd spent the last month trying not to be found by. He glanced at Braca. She watched him with that steady gaze. "You're not from the clans around here," he said. "No, that means you crossed the ridge." "Yes, that's not a small trip for someone injured." Braca's jaw tightened. "I didn't have a choice." Ryan studied her hands, scarred, calloused, the nails thick and dark. One thumb had been broken once and healed crooked. This was someone who had fought often. "Who did that to you?" he asked, nodding toward her side. Braca's eyes went flat. "My own." Ryan felt his eyebrows lift. "Your own clan? My warband? That's not the same thing. It is when you have no family," she said, and the words came out like gravel. Ryan's mouth went dry. "Why?" Braca stared at the lantern flame as if it was a memory. "Because I refused." "Refused what?" She looked at him then, and something in her expression warned him away. "Enough questions, human." Ryan leaned back, raising a hand. "All right." But his mind wouldn't let go. Orc warbands didn't abandon their strong, not unless there was betrayal, or weakness, or dissent. He didn't know which was worse. His teeth began to chatter, despite himself. He hated that sound. It made him feel small. Braca's eyes flicked to his shaking shoulders. "You'll freeze," she said. "I'll manage." She snorted again. "Humans always say that, then you die." "I'm not dying," he snapped, sharper than he meant. Braca blinked once as if surprised by his tone. Then she did something he didn't expect. She shifted, reached into her satchel, and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in waxed cloth. She unwrapped it and revealed dried meat, dark and tough, and a few hard biscuits. She held one out. Ryan stared. "Why?" "Eat," she said. "It helps." He hesitated, then accepted it. His fingers brushed hers. Her skin was warmer than he'd expected. He bit into the biscuit. It nearly broke a tooth, but the taste of salt and grain made his body remember it was alive. "Thanks," he muttered around a chew. Braca shrugged, as if the word meant nothing. He ate slowly, keeping his eyes on her. She tore into the dried meat with the efficiency of someone who didn't waste energy on pleasure. After a while, he said, "If we don't make a fire, we might not last." Braca swallowed and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Fire makes smoke. Not much if we keep it small. Smoke travels. So does freezing, Ryan said. That earned another ghost of amusement in her eyes. He began pulling out tinder anyway. "I'm lighting it," he said. "If you don't want to be seen, you can leave." Braca stared at him as if measuring the thickness of his stubbornness. Then she grunted, "Keep it low." Ryan built the fire in the old ring of stones, grateful someone had already done the work of clearing ash. The first sparks died. The second caught. The flame took, small and hungry. Warmth spread outward in a slow, hesitant circle. Ryan held his hands toward it, relief flooding him so hard it almost hurt. Braca didn't move closer. She sat where she was, half in the lantern's reach, watching the fire like it was an enemy she didn't trust. Ryan fed it only tiny sticks. He kept it as low as a candle. It still felt like the sun compared to the wind outside. As the hours crawled, the storm began to throw itself against the mountain. The vines at the entrance shivered. Snow hissed down the rock face. The cave held, but the sound of the blizzard made the darkness feel alive. Ryan tried to sleep. He couldn't. Not with Braca there, not with her sighs and her silence, not with the questions prickling at his skin like ice. Instead, he listened to the storm and to her breathing, slow, controlled, as if she was refusing to let pain or fear speed it up. At some point, Braca shifted. She pressed a hand to her ribs again, shoulders tightening. Ryan's eyes snapped open. "You're worse," he said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding," Braca's gaze flashed. "I said don't." "If you pass out, you'll die," Ryan said, "and I'm not going to sit here pretending we're both made of stone." Braca stared at him for a long moment, then she laughed, a short, surprised bark that turned into a wince. "Humans," she muttered. Ryan dug into his pack and pulled out a roll of cloth, a small jar of salve, and a curved needle with thread. Braca's nostrils flared. "You carry sewing supplies." "I'm a courier," he said. "Clothes tear." "And wounds," he paused. "Sometimes." Braca's eyes narrowed. "Show me." He hesitated. Then he lifted his sleeve and pulled back his cuff, revealing a scar that ran along his forearm, white, thick, and ugly, like a rope under skin. Braca stared at it. "Blade." "Yeah, who?" Ryan met her gaze. "My own." The words hung there, a mirror of hers. Braca's expression shifted. Something softened, just barely, like rock warmed by a fire it didn't want to admit it needed. She looked down at her fur, then slowly pulled it aside. The wound was along her lower ribs, a jagged slash that had been roughly bound with cloth. The cloth was soaked through. Dark blood had crusted at the edges. Ryan swallowed hard. That wasn't a scratch. That was a message. "Hold still," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Braca's jaw clenched. "If you hurt me, I'm already in a cave with an orc who could break my spine," he said. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be this polite." Her lips twitched again. Ryan carefully removed the old bandage. The wound gaped slightly, angry and raw. It had started to knit, but poorly. Infection was a whisper away. He cleaned it with water warmed near the fire, then dabbed the salve on. Braca didn't flinch, but her fingers dug into the stone beside her, leaving faint scratches. "You should have stitched it," Ryan said. "I tried." "With what?" Braca's gaze flicked to the needle. "Not that," Ryan sighed. "This will hurt." Braca's eyes locked on his. "Do it." He worked with quick, practiced motions, hands steady. He didn't look at her face while he did it. He listened instead to the way her breath hitched, to the low rumble that escaped her throat once or twice, like a growl swallowed before it became one. When he finished, he tied the thread and bandaged her properly. Braca sat still for a moment, breathing hard through her nose. Then she said, voice tight, "You've done this before." Ryan wrapped his supplies away. "Yeah. Why?" He stared at the fire. "Because the world doesn't care if you're bleeding." Braca's gaze lingered on him. "That's true." They sat in silence again, but it was different now. Less like two weapons pointed at each other, more like two animals sharing a den because the storm demanded it. Later, when the fire burned low and Ryan's eyelids finally began to droop, Braca spoke. Human, he murmured. Her voice came quieter, rougher. What are you running from? Ryan's eyes opened. He considered lying, but she'd shown her wound. He'd shown his scar. Lies felt thin in that space. The city, he said. That's not an answer. The kind of people who own the city, Ryan corrected. Braca grunted. Kings, merchants, he said, and the bitterness surprised him. A guild. They pay men to do ugly work and call it order. Braca's eyes narrowed. And you were part of it. Ryan's throat tightened. I carried messages. Sometimes I didn't ask what they meant. Sometimes I did and wished I hadn't. And then I decided I was done. Braca studied him, then nodded once. So they hunt you? Yes. Braca's gaze shifted to the cave entrance. They won't come up here in this storm. No, Ryan agreed. But when it clears, they might. Braca was quiet, then said, if they come, I can kill them. Ryan almost laughed. I'm not sure that helps. It helps me, Braca said simply. Ryan looked at her surprised. Why? Braca's mouth tightened as if the word itself tasted sour. Because I owe a debt. I didn't save you. You still stitched my ribs, she said. You didn't have to. Ryan stared at the fire again. The warmth made his cheeks sting. I couldn't just let you rot. Braca's gaze sharpened. Why not? Ryan's answer came before he could stop it. Because I know what it feels like to be discarded. Braca went very still. The storm outside roared, but in the cave it felt like the world had leaned in. After a long moment, Braca said, then you understand. Ryan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Sleep finally took him in a messy, half-alert way, like a man sleeping beside a cliff edge. He woke to heat, not the fire. The fire had died to embers. This was different. He was warmer, too warm, considering the stone floor and the snow-packed wind outside. He blinked and realized he wasn't alone on his side of the cave anymore. Braca lay near him, back to the entrance, her body a wall between him and the cold. The fur cape had been pulled partly over both of them. Her breath rose and fell slow and steady. Ryan froze, his mind scrambling. Had she moved in her sleep? No, orcs didn't move like that without meaning it. Not someone like her. Not someone who braced herself against pain like it was an enemy. He shifted slightly. The warmth was real, radiating from her like a living hearth. Her skin felt hot through the fur. Braca's eyes opened at once. She didn't startle. She simply looked at him as if she'd been awake for an hour. You were shaking, she said. Ryan swallowed. I wasn't. You were, she repeated. You would have frozen. He didn't like how relieved he felt. Braca's gaze dropped to his hands, then to his face. So, she said, voice quieter, can I ask something human? Ryan's throat tightened. You already ask things. This one is different. She hesitated, as if choosing words with care. Then she said the line that would stay with him long after he left the mountains, long after he stopped tasting snow in his breath. Can I feel your warmth tonight? The question hung between them like a fragile thing, not a demand, not a joke, a need. Ryan stared at her, startled all over again. It was so direct. So simple. And beneath it, he felt the weight of everything she wasn't saying, the wound, the exile, the storm, the way her warband had left her bleeding and alone. Warmth wasn't just heat. Warmth was safety. Warmth was being allowed close. Ryan's mind sprinted through every warning he'd ever heard about orcs and humans, every story, every tavern tale, but none of those stories had this cave, this fire, this stitched wound. This woman who had put her body between him and the cold without asking anything in return. He could refuse. He should refuse, a cautious voice whispered. He didn't know her, she didn't know him. It could be a trap. But then she said, almost as if she'd heard his fear, not like that. Ryan blinked. Braca's jaw tightened, pride prickling. I don't mean mating, she growled softly. I mean sleep, close, heat shared. My people do it when we travel. It keeps the weak alive. Ryan felt his face warm for a different reason. He looked away, embarrassed. I assumed, he admitted. Braca's eyes glinted. Humans always assume. He exhaled slowly. The truth was, the idea of moving away from her warmth made his bones ache. He was still cold, still tired, still hunted, still a man who had been alone for too long. His answer surprised her because it surprised him. Yes, he said, you can. Braca stared at him as if she hadn't expected the word. The rigid line of her shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good," she said, and the sound came out like relief she didn't want to show. Ryan adjusted the fur cape, pulling it more evenly over them. He stayed careful, leaving space, giving her room to pull back if she wanted. Braca shifted closer anyway, not pressing, not clinging, just settling like someone who had finally stopped fighting the simple fact that the night was cold. Ryan felt the steady heat of her body seep into his muscles. For the first time in days, his fingers stopped trembling. They lay like that, listening to the storm and the quiet. After a while, Braca spoke again, voice low in the dark. "My warband called me traitor." Ryan's eyes opened. He didn't speak. He waited. Braca's hand flexed against the stone. "We were hired by a human lord," she said, "to burn a village at the edge of his land, human farmers, children." Ryan's stomach tightened. "They said it was easy coin," Braca continued. "They said humans are soft. They said it would teach the border lords fear." Her breath hitched once. "I saw a child, small, limp with fever. Her mother begged." Ryan swallowed hard. Braca's voice dropped. "I refused. I told my captain we take the coin and leave without fire. He laughed. He said I'd grown weak. He said the warband needed blood to stay sharp." Her eyes, though Ryan couldn't see them clearly, felt fixed on him like a weight. "So I stopped him. With words." "With my blade," Braca said flatly. "I struck him down when he raised his torch." Ryan's heart thudded. "They called it betrayal," she said. "They cut me for it. They left me to die in the pass as a lesson. See what happens when you choose the enemy," they said. Ryan lay still, the story settling into his ribs like cold water. "You didn't choose the enemy," he said quietly. "You chose not to murder." Braca let out a slow breath. "To them, it's the same." Ryan stared into the dark. He thought of the guild men in the city, the way they'd smiled while ordering violence, the way they'd called it business. "I think," he said slowly, "you and I are both traitors in the eyes of cruel people." Braca was silent, then her voice came out rougher. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" Ryan huffed a small laugh. "No, just makes me feel less alone." He felt her shift slightly, and then unexpectedly her hand reached out and rested on his forearm, heavy and warm, not possessive, anchoring. They slept again, and this time Ryan fell deeper. The storm's howl became distant. The mountain's cold became something held back by shared heat. When dawn finally pushed its pale light through the vines at the entrance, the cave turned from black to gray. Ryan woke to find Braca already sitting up, gaze fixed toward the crack of light like she'd been guarding it all night. "How long have you been awake?" he murmured, rubbing his eyes. "Long enough to hear the storm break," she said. Outside, the wind had softened. Snow still fell, but in lazy flakes now, not a frenzy. Ryan sat up carefully, feeling stiffness in his limbs, but also a surprising steadiness. He hadn't slept so well in weeks. He looked at Braca. The bandage around her ribs was clean, though the skin above it was pale and tight. "You need to rest more," he said. Braca snorted. "I need to move." Ryan's heart sank. "You're leaving." "Yes." He hesitated, then said, "Where will you go?" Braca's gaze didn't shift from the entrance. "East. Past the ridge. There's a valley where no warbands roam, old ruins. I can hide there until my wound closes. And then," Braca's eyes finally turned to him, "then I decide who I am without them." Ryan swallowed. "They might follow." "They will," she said simply. Ryan stared at his hands. He thought of the guild, of their hired men, of how they never let a courier walk away from secrets. "I can't go back," he said quietly. "Not to the city." "Then don't," Braca replied, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Ryan let out a breath. "I don't have a plan." Braca's tusks showed slightly as her lips pulled into something that almost counted as a grin. "Plans are for chiefs and merchants. Survivors walk." Ryan looked at her, then toward the entrance, toward the white world beyond. He could go alone. He'd always gone alone. But the memory of the night, of warmth shared without bargaining, of truth offered without decoration, made the idea of solitude feel heavier than it used to. He met her gaze. "I'm heading east too," he said, and it was half truth, half decision. "At least until the next crossroads." Braca studied him, and for a heartbeat Ryan wondered if she'd refuse, if she'd decide he was dead weight. Instead, she nodded once. Stay behind me in open ground, she said, and don't try to be brave. Ryan's mouth twitched. Wasn't planning on it. Braca stood, towering, and pulled her fur cape tight. She grabbed her lantern and extinguished it. Ryan packed quickly, stamping his feet to bring blood back into them. Before they left, Braca paused. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small, carved token bone etched with a simple symbol like a split moon. She held it out. Ryan hesitated. What is it? A mark, Braca said. From my mother, it says I belong to a bloodline that doesn't break its word. Ryan stared at it. Why give it to me? Braca's gaze sharpened as if she dared him to make it sentimental. Because you stitched my ribs, because you shared fire, because you didn't treat me like a monster. Ryan took the token carefully. It felt warm, like it had been against her skin. I'll give it back, he said. Braca's eyes flicked over him. You'd better. If you don't, I'll hunt you. Ryan laughed softly. There it is. Braca's lips twitched again. There it is. They stepped through the vines into the pale morning. The wind nipped, but less viciously now. The world glittered with fresh snow, and the mountains rose like sleeping beasts. They started down the trail together, an orc woman with a stitched wound and a human courier with a scar, both labeled traitor by people who didn't deserve loyalty. The pass opened into a wide stretch of white, and for the first time Ryan saw tracks, boot prints, fresh, not theirs. He froze. Braca crouched, fingers brushing the snow like a hunter reading ink. Her eyes narrowed. 3, she murmured. Humans moving fast. Ryan's pulse jumped. The guild, maybe, Braca said. Or your lord's men, Ryan swallowed. Either way, they're looking for someone. Braca straightened, eyes hard. Then we don't let them find us. Ryan tightened his pack straps, heart hammering. And how do we do that? Braca glanced back at him, amber eyes bright as fire. She answered with the same blunt certainty she'd used all night. Stay close, she said. Share warmth. Then she turned and led him off the trail into the pines where snow muffled footsteps and the world held its breath. And Ryan followed because for once the thing he was chasing wasn't safety or coin or escape. It was the strange, stubborn promise of not freezing alone.